Welcome to Rethinking Death.Life. Today's guest is an amazing woman. Dr. Pamela Pyle is a board-certified internal medicine physician, chair of the board of Africa New Life Ministries in Rwanda. I share some experiences. We know some of the same people in Rwanda. It's an amazing country. And a Museum of the Bible's Woman of Legacy, but she's also has 5 children, 8 grandchildren. She's an adventurer. She's got a wonderful husband. She lives on airplanes and in South Carolina. So whether it's, she makes a difference in so many lives. Her book is fabulous. Read her book. Let's welcome today Dr. Pamela Pyle. Thank you for coming, Pamela.
Thank you. I just want to say, it makes my life sound like perfect, and I am like the rest of your listeners, an imperfect person living an imperfect life. So,
but God,
I feel your pain
in many ways. I just
understand
that God is you are being.
Yes,
exactly. We're all doing the best we can, and we so appreciate you showing up here today with all your responsibilities and everything. And I guess the first question I'd like to ask you is, why do you think conversations about death are so difficult between patients and physicians, and how can we begin to change those dynamics?
Physicians were taught that our job is to save lives.
Exactly.
And to save lives at all costs. And the problem with that is we've become a society seeking immortality.
Right.
And in many ways, doctors are carrying that burden, and science is making it seem like immortality is just around that next day on the ventilator. So the most important thing is understanding that we are mortal beings. Now, having the conversation with your doctor and helping them understand that can sometimes be difficult. But the most important thing is really to have questions prepared in advance. And it may be that you even call an office and say, I have a list of questions. This is what I'd like to spend my doctor time with. Is this appropriate appointment, or do I need to add an additional appointment? And then ask them things. If let's say you have a serious illness, you want to know, and you want them to tell you when it's time to go from seeking more days to seeking better quality days. And if you start those conversations and lead those conversations, which a lot of that I give you very specifics in the book, you'll be surprised your doctor will follow you.
I just thought this was one of the most important parts of your book. In fact, when my husband Jim died, nobody would tell me he was dying, and he hated hospitals. He wanted to get out, but I just kept thinking, well, you're going to get better. But then I finally figured out myself that he really wasn't getting better. He was actually getting worse. And then we decided to bring him home and eventually to hospice. But had I been told earlier, he would have been a lot more comfortable for a longer period home. And you mentioned in your book that hospice, we aren't using hospice as much as we could because nobody's telling us we're dying until we were like, oh, almost dead. We don't have the 6 months. So it's just a very, very, again, I love that part of your book. Dr. Pyle, from your perspective as a physician, what are some of the common mistakes people make when they're trying to discuss end-of-life care with their doctors?
I would say that probably the most common mistake is they don't have a sense of their own personhood or their own power to ask the question at all. They become intimidated. Doctors don't necessarily help them overcome that. And so first understanding your rights and perhaps writing the questions down in advance of the meeting or your appointment. And if your doctor seems rushed or doesn't answer your questions fully, just say, I'd like to schedule an appointment to go through my questions. Is that an appropriate thing to do with you, or would you like to do that now? And then I always ask my final question for any doctor or clinician I'm seeing. Is there anything that I haven't asked that I should have asked?
Yeah.
Or if this were your spouse or someone you love, what would you do if you were me? And that tends to put a reality vision
Yeah.
for all of us as clinicians, that we have loved ones that go through things too.
Mhm.
And we've been in doctors' offices as patients too. And how do we best care for the person in front of us? So know your rights and don't be afraid to ask the question.
Dr. Powell, if there's one question that you should ask your doctor, what would it be?
I mentioned this, that I think when you bring the question, if this were someone you loved, what would you do if you were me?
Wonderful.
And that really, as doctors, we tend to think, we won't get sick. So it's not good to say, if this were you, what would you do? But when you put it in the context of,
Right.
is this someone you love? There's a deep reality to that we all feel as clinicians. So it brings it very personal, and you'll more likely get a very thoughtful answer.
Wonderful. Well, we're so grateful to have you on today. And the one question we'd like to ask our audience members our listeners, is if you're faced with an end of life situation, how are you going to discuss the issue? How are you going to start the conversation with your physician? And Dr. Pyle has given us so many insights on this today. So Dr. Pyle, for our listeners, where can they find your book and where can they find your information?
The best place is to go to my website, drpamela.com, drpamela.com. And there's so many free resources there, but you can also access the bookstores that carry my book, or you could just go directly to Amazon, Anticipating Heaven, Dr. Pamela Pyle. And when you read it, I just have a sense that you'll feel like you're more prepared. And if not for yourself, you're prepared for your loved one. And what matters more than that?
Awesome. Exactly. Dr. Powell, thank you so much for being with us here today. And
My pleasure.
we'd ask our listeners to subscribe, to like, and to share with people that you think could benefit from this podcast.